If I didn't get hit by this boat, where would I be right now? What is going to become of me? Like, who am I going to be? Like, my entire future was just kind of gone at that moment. It helped strengthen my faith, and it strengthened who I was, and that's what matters most. It's really hard to keep track of, like, all platforms simultaneously. Just, like, through my music, because I'm trying to do the same thing. Because, like, if you're not popping on one platform, you're missing out on a whole uncharted waters of, like, people that could potentially be digesting your content. Like, TikTok algorithm and Instagram algorithm are two completely different things. And the algorithm is one thing. It's one of the most impossible things to predict. It's one of the most impossible things to predict on the internet. Like, I run a couple theme pages on Instagram. One of them is a gym fails account, right? So I just kind of repost other content of, like, other, like, gym bros who, like, just fails in the gym, you know? And so I tried to post, like, 2 videos a day, right? And those range from, like, 10 seconds to 30 seconds, right? I posted this one video. It was this Indian dude on this toilet, but he made this mechanism where it's like he would be on the toilet but also, like, do, like, chest pulls at the same time. One of the dumbest videos I've ever reposted, but for absolutely no reason. Like, I'm telling you, this thing, like, to actually witness something that you put out there go viral, like, it started racking in millions of views, like, millions. I'm talking for a straight month. I would just get ding, 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 ding off the dumbest video I've ever posted. And it's like people are, like, commenting, like, yo, this is the funniest thing I've ever seen. And it makes you realize, like, wait, like, there are billions of people out there on social media who have completely different tastes in digesting certain content and comedy, right? So it's like, when you realize, like, your content is loved by millions of people out there, like, once you know confidently, because it is, like, this podcast has a potential audience of hundreds of millions of people, and that's a fact. That's not even, that's a fact, because there's so many people out there. And it's like, to have that mentality, that's what helps me drive, like, my passion for social media. It's just put content out there, just pick up those people, because someday the audience is going to build up to that massive number you're thinking. And giving up, like, if you give up, then you're missing out on that whole plethora of people that are going to be loving your content, because there is people out there and there is an audience. And so, like, when I saw that dumb video go viral, and I was like, you know, like, I'm just going to keep posting, because I was like, you start to, like, you know, it starts to get dry a little bit. It starts to, like I'm wasting 30 minutes of my day, like, reposting this stuff. But, like, someday, like, people are gonna absolutely love your account just for what it is, you know?
It just takes one video. And, like, I think I sent you this for podcasts. A lot of people create podcasts and just, like, there's a joke. Like, we get a comment. So my favorite comment is, like, let's start a podcast. Like, I love that. But so for podcasts, most podcasts don't make it past 3 episodes. 90% get to 20. And then of that 90% that get to 20, like, a fraction that get to 21. And this is podcast 22 that we're making. So, like, we're there. Like, we're it just keep pushing.
You guys are among the top percent right now.
We are. So, hear that, Laney?
To some extent, yeah. This is also the first podcast of the new year.
There were, it could be. I think
so, right?
Yeah, no, Corey's is. This is.
Oh, that is? Okay, my bad.
Yeah, we got 2 back-to-back musicians. This is
Kolbe
Ballard. Yeah, he's a rock star. You're a rap star. So it's excited to have you on here. I love that transition. it's just so, like, it's, like, fun, awkward. Like, I'm not good at it, but it's super cool. But we, like, thank you for coming on. I know you reached out to us. I always wanted you on too. It's like, I'm like, all right, Kolbe. And then you started producing, like, dropping songs. I'm, like, listening to them. Like, we need to get this guy on the podcast.
No, I'm super excited to be here. Like, I don't know, the podcast scene. Like, I've never been really a part of it. I never really listened to podcasts. But recently, you know, I've been seeing podcasts kind of pick up, and I've seen, like, you know, just random artists and like, I follow a lot of artists, right, on my platforms and whatnot, and I see them on podcasts just kind of talking about their life, and I'm like, you know what, like, I want to tell people, you know, why am I doing what I'm doing, you know, like, what's my vision, like, what drives me to, like, do what I'm doing. I was like, what better way to do that on a podcast, especially with a couple buddies that I know. But yeah, Brian hooked me up on this podcast, so I'm thankful for Brian, for sure.
We love Brian.
Yeah, Brian's our favorite. You know, it takes a lot of time. You know, he's away from his wife a lot, but we really appreciate it. But yeah, you're right. Podcast gives the unique ability to tell, like, your whole story. Or, like, a YouTube video, it's like you sit down front of a camera and it's, like, really forced. It's just a conversation, you know. And just jumping into, you talk about, like, showing people, like, who you are and, like, what you want to do. So before we get too far into music, like, you were homeschooled growing up.
I was.
And now you are at a
conservative Christian university in Colorado.
How's that going? Like with you, I know you said you were Catholic.
Yeah.
In that Christian university, I know it's not easy.
Yeah. No. The decision I had to make to, move out 20 hours away from my family and go to a conservative Christian school, it was a huge decision, and till this day, I've still kept to my Catholic faith, and I still absolutely love the Catholic faith, and I have no plans of ever turning away from that. But, I knew when I made the decision to go to a conservative Christian school, like I was going to be challenged in a lot of ways. And I think, probably one of the main things that really drew me to Colorado was just the change in scenery, and I just love nature and I love the mountains. Because there's this really strong Catholic school in Ohio, Franciscan University, and when I envisioned what my college life would look like, I kind of pictured it, similar to that, strong individuals building each other up and through their faith, right? But I was also going through a pretty difficult time in my faith during that time where I made that decision. And I told myself, I was like, and I'll kind of talk further. I had the wrong mentality when it came to that decision, but my mentality was, I'm hanging out with a bunch of dudes that, they're not pushing me to be the person I want to be. I'm not the person I want to be. I'm not making the decisions that I want to make. I'm just going to leave my life here and then enter a new community of people, of Christ-loving individuals, and just kind of hope that it brings out the best in me. But what ended up happening, and the saying is wherever you go, there you are, right? Mm-hmm. And that's what happened. So I kept that I kept that same spirit about me of just kind of being that middle child homeschool kid who wanted to rebel and do whatever he wanted to do and do whatever he felt like, go to whatever parties he can get into, whatever next thing was coming up, whatever the vaping, drinking, whatever the heck that was, just to I don't know, I wanted to feel something, just you know how it is. Yeah. And so I was like, I just don't like this track that I'm going down. So I went to Colorado Christian University, and it didn't take too long for me to realize that I started developing a very similar friend group there to what I had in Ohio. And that's not what I wanted in my heart, but that's just what ended up happening, because that was the type of person I was, right? The crazy thing is though, I went there, and I all the substance abuse that I was struggling with in high school, I was able to kind of put that behind me. I was, using marijuana quite frequently out here in Ohio. And I wasn't happy with that. So I put all that behind me, and I went to Colorado, and I know that's kind of ironic. Yeah. Yeah. But so I was out there, and for the first month or so, I had high hopes. I was like, this is going to be great. But then I was in this one class, I think it was strategic communications intro. And this one dude in my class, he kind of he got my contact because we were in some type of group together. And he was like, yo, come to my house on Friday. I have some dudes hanging out, whatever. I was like, bet, I'm trying to meet new people, right? That's the whole point of college. So I show up to this dude's house, and within 2 weeks, I'm a freshman, right? And this dude was a junior, and I was at his house, and I was probably one of the only freshmen there. And I was introduced to the party scene of Colorado Christian University. Colorado Christian University, man. This is the most dry campus in Colorado, probably in North America, right? But there's always a party scene. And the fact that I got sucked into it so fast, and I asked him, I was like, so why'd you hit me up? He was like, oh, you wear rings and stuff. You seem like a cool, chill guy. And he texted me before Friday. He's like, are you chill? I'm like, what do you mean chill? He's like, no, are you chill like that? Do you drink? I'm like, I mean, every once in a while, I mean, I'm not opposed to it. I'm not trying to come across as some stuck up dude who's never drunk, because I wasn't trying to lie to him,
Yeah.
And so that was honestly I just didn't see where that was going. So I showed up to his house. It was introduced to the party scene, and from then on, it just kind of that was kind of what I was drawn to. For my freshman year, I was just sucked into that party life at Colorado Christian University. And when you decide to make a huge decision to leave something that was damaging you, and you get put into another situation like that, but in this case it's with people that you're just meeting and you're getting friendships with, it kind of blindsided me a little bit, and it kind of was oh, this is where I'm supposed to be, I'm living my best life. I have good friends, I hang out with people all the time. It's I'm going to parties and whatnot. So that mentality, if I want to change, I put that to the side a little bit. But so freshman year is pretty much just kind of surrounded in just partying and whatnot. And then summer hit, so I came back to Ohio, and that was difficult, right? Like, I don't know if you guys have experienced something like this where you've been gone for like a year or two and you come back to like your hometown and it's different. You have to like realize like who your real friends are. You have to like, okay, who am I going to spend time with? Because you know at some point you're probably not going to come back. So why are you going to waste your time with friends who aren't going to give you the time of day? And it kind of hit me there where I had to drop so many friendships that I had in Ohio because I realized that they were all surface level. Like they were surface level relationships, and that felt super, like I felt super lonely at that point. And I was like, dang, like throughout my high school years where I thought like I was like this popular kid and I had a bunch of friends, it was just all like kind of surface level. So I really had to kind of redefine myself a little bit there and like kind of figure out more of who I was. And that's kind of like my whole college experience was kind of figuring out who I was. And it's crazy to think like each semester I've been there, this is my third semester and my final semester, it just kind of felt like a different chapter in my life, you know, like each semester was a next step in, God willing, the right direction. And it wasn't until like this past summer where I actually heavily experienced God's presence in my life and him like swooping down. It almost felt like a Paul moment where he's like hit with this beam of light. I mean, obviously the Bible doesn't explicitly say he was riding a donkey and he got hit off, but like that's what it felt like. Yeah. Where I was literally, like, quite literally driving back from the situation that I had with the military where like my life was flashing before my eyes, and I was driving back in my car and through, like, it was raining out, right? But my window was slightly open because it was like hot in my car. I didn't have AC. And so this beam of light just shoots out of this cloud in the midst of this rain, and it hits me on the shoulder. And you know, like, beam of light hits you on the shoulder, like it feels warm. But it was to the point where I don't know if you guys have experienced this, like coming out of confession before, when like the priest lays his hands over you and he's like, your sins are forgiven, and you feel like the presence of the Holy Spirit just filling your entire, and maybe that's adoration for you. But that's the experience that I had, because in that moment I was like, what is going to become of me? Like, who am I going to be? Like, my entire future was just kind of gone at that moment. And I felt that presence of the Holy Spirit hit me. And in that moment, I started sobbing. I knew, like, God is going to be with me no matter what. And, like, I knew God, like, explicitly reached out and he's like, come on, dude, like, you're not heading towards the right direction. You got to change things up a little bit. And, you know, God does that. You know, he does that to people. But that doesn't make everything better unless you put all your cards in that bucket immediately and run with it. Like, you have to hit the ground running. Like, in that moment, I hit the ground running. Like, I knew God he's present in my life, and the only way that I can find my way out of this mess that I'm in, and I'll elaborate more of that mess because I know you guys are itching to know what happened. But like, I was like, I put everything aside. I put like who I was, who I wanted to be. Like, I was so focused on building my future, building myself as a person, as an individual. Like, what am I going to be good at? What am I going to succeed at? Like, what do I want to focus my time on? And it was nothing where it was like, okay, God, where do you want me to be? And at that moment, and that was July of this past summer, that's the mentality I've had. And ever since, like, I'm so thankful that I've been able to keep that mentality, and I'm confident in, like, okay, you know, this is, like, I'm finally kind of going towards where I want to be, because, you know, I'm putting God first in everything. But I can kind of talk to kind of like what caused all of that. Please, if now's a good time. Yeah. So I was, you know, this past summer was difficult, but also a huge learning moment for me, because like I was living in my own house. I had my own house with some friends. I would wake up, work, come back, hit the gym, make my own dinner, and then like make music in the evening or go shoot pool with some friends. And that was pretty much my whole summer, right? It was just me and then a few guys in my house that were there, because a few of them were still like back at their parents' house for college, and they were just paying from a distance. So I had to learn how to be okay by myself. And, you know, there's this term, and I guess I pull it from one of Love's songs called Modern Loneliness. And it's like the feeling of loneliness, but like, are you actually alone, or do you just feel lonely? Like, do you actually have people you can reach out to, and are you just sitting in your bed pouting, feeling lonely because you just don't have the motivation to reach out for help? Or are you lonely because you actually have nobody? And this summer I had to figure out, okay, how do I allow myself to feel alone and happy, right? Because like I would just do my own thing every day. Like every week was the same. And that was a huge learning moment for me for sure, because that I feel like once you're able to kind of master that, if you will, you start to feel a lot more confident and sure about yourself. But yeah, it was just, a regular day. I wake up and I get a call from my my commanding officer at my reserve unit. And he's like, yo, have you taken any drug tests recently? And I thought about it. I was like, no, the last drug test I took was probably like 7 months ago. And he's like, that's interesting, because the security administration, like, that presides over the entire United States military, he was like, they sent a package to my desk, and it says that your security clearance is about to be revoked due to a failed drug test. And rewind to a year ago in April, right? This was another one of those God moments that I chose to ignore and put aside. Just kind of speaks to the fact where God can come down and you can ignore him and nothing can change. And that was when I made this terrible decision to smoke weed with some friends in Colorado, because, I just had a weak moment and it just happened. I didn't really think twice about it. But at the end of the day, like, I'm a soldier, right? Like, that's something you have to think about 24/7, and it's not something that was on my mind. Sure enough, that next week we get drug tested in the reserves, and drug tests come very infrequently in the reserves. And so it happened. I knew I failed the test when I took it. So I was just, that whole month between that drill and the next, I knew I was just dreading, okay, what's going to happen, right? So I come back to drill the next month. My master sergeant sits me down. He was like, do you know why you're here? I'm like, yeah, I know why I'm here. I failed that drug test, didn't I? He's like, yeah. He's like, you had Delta 8 in your system, which is like this up-and-coming drug, which apparently wasn't made federally illegal 2 days prior to the meeting that we sat down on. So this was April, and it was made federally legal in March. So this is 3 days. So I failed the test while it was still federally legal. And then he sat me down 3 days after it was made federally illegal.
Oh.
So he was like, I get it. Like, you're still young. He's like, you're still figuring out how to make good decisions for yourself. He's like, this is going to stay between you and me. He was like, no one else is going to hear about this. He's like, if it happens again, I'm going to remember, I'm going to flag you. But that's just how it's going to be here. And he's like, don't take this for granted. He's like, I'm helping you out here. So I was kind of confused. Because when I got that phone call a year later, I was like, does it say April of last year? He's like, yeah. So what ended up happening was, so I joined the ROTC my second year of college. So that was after I had failed that drug test. And what ended up happening was the ROTC found out about that incident, and they're very less willing with that type of incident. So they got wind of it, which, brought me into this whole altercation with the ROTC. So I had to meet with the lieutenant colonel. I had to sit with her, I had to interview her, and I had to kind of just interview up the chain, send in a packet of like not referrals, but what do you call it?
Like
references and stuff, like a criminal background check and whatnot. And at the end of the day, the ROTC troop that I was a part of, they decided to not go along with the packet, and they decided to disenroll me from the program. And that was super tough, right? Because like being an officer in the United States military was one of like my goals in life, right? And it wasn't like one of those things where I dreamed of it since a young age. It was almost kind of like a spontaneous decision that I made. And it wasn't rooted in any way, shape, or form in my faith or in God. I didn't consult God about this decision I made. I just felt like it was best for me, and it would set me up best for like what I'm trying to do in the future. So when that hit me, I was just like filled with dread. I was like, what is going to become of me? Because the ROTC was what was paying for my school, right? So I was like, okay, I'm going to drop out of school. I'm going to go back home to Ohio. I'm not going to have this future career. What's going to become of me, right? So that was the first incident, right? That was in July. So then, a couple weeks go by, and this is before I find out that I'm kicked out of the ROTC, because I don't find that out until about a week before school starts. So, I'm going back to my job, going back to my life and whatnot. And so I go to that first drill after I get the call from my commander, and he sits me down. And he runs me through the packet, and he talks to me about the severity of the situation. And he's like, hey, man, like, this is really serious. He's like, your security clearance could become revoked. And this is apart from the ROTC, by the way. Like, this is my security clearance. And he's pretty much like, he's like, I'm going to fight for you because, like, I believe in you as a soldier, and I'm going to go bat to bat for you, and I'm going to be a reference for you for the security administration, which, like, I didn't have a super strong relationship with my commander at that point, right? Because like I was a lower enlisted dude. Like, yeah, I was an officer in training, but still, like, you don't really communicate with your commander very much. So this is one of the first times I had a face-to-face conversation with this man. He sat me down, and for him to tell me that, like, that honestly meant a lot to me. But at the end of the day, like, I was still hit with the severity of the situation. So on my way back from that drill, that's when that experience happened to me, where I was hit by that beam of light. And in that moment, when I made that decision, that whatever happens to me, like, doesn't matter if I get kicked out of school, kicked out of the army, whatever happens to me, I'm going to hit the ground running, and I'm going to turn my life to something worth it. I'm going to turn my life to something pleasing to God, regardless of what that's going to be. I had no idea what it was going to be at that point, but that's what was going to happen. And I'm telling you right now, if I hadn't made that decision right then and there, I would not be in the same place I am now, because so much more happened after that situation. Because, like, when I made that decision, right, so that off-campus house I was living in that I told you about, those were with all my close friends, which meant that, you know, we wanted to kind of designate that house as the new CCU party house because we had the capability of doing that. So I was like, I can't do that. I was like, if I'm trying to, like, straighten my path, I can't do that. And I was, like, the housing was phenomenal. It was 50% less to live there than it was on campus. So I had to make the decision. I had to call the vice president of the school a week before school started. I was like, yo, do you have any housing left on campus? I was like, I'm stuck in a situation right now, and I can't live in this house anymore. I was like, can you help me out? So dude gave me a scholarship to match the price of what I was living outside, right? And so I left that house, and like I felt super bad, right? Because I was part of a lease, but I told them I'd make it work out for them. I was like, I know I made a commitment, and I know that by me leaving, it's going to cause you guys to pay more, but I was like, I'm going to make it work out. I was like, just trust me. So during that, so 2 weeks before school, I'm in Florida, right, with my family. And I fly into Florida on a Friday. And while I'm in Florida, I'm filling out my packet for the ROTC. I'm figuring out how to change housing coming into this next semester. And then, so I fly in Friday, and then Saturday we go out boating to go snorkeling, right? So we park out, we're at West Palm Beach, and we're right off the coast. And we're jumping in the water because the water's like super clear. We're just kind of swimming a little bit before we start snorkeling. So we start anchoring the boat, and the driver of the boat, the owner of the boat, my uncle, he's putting the anchor down. He's in the water on the front of the boat, and I'm behind the boat putting my snorkel gear on. So I jump in the water. And before I even resurface, so I'm in the water, before I resurface, I get hit by the boat. And so I'm kind of confused, right? So I'm like, wait, did I hit the boat? Did I run into the boat, or did the boat hit me? Because, like, I hadn't resurfaced yet. What ended up happening was, as soon as I jumped in, the owner of the boat was like, back up the boat a little bit, just so, like, he can readjust the anchor. And what ended up happening was, I didn't realize this yet until, like, I got hit. Like, I stood up and I saw blood gushing everywhere in the water. And I was like, what the hell is that? And then I lift my foot up and I see my left fibula sticking out of my leg. And then I got chopped up on my right calf, and then also on my kneecap on my left side. And immediately when I saw that, you know, my body had two options. It was either to completely pass out and shut down from seeing my bone sticking out of my leg, or it was to go into complete survival mode. So I went into complete survival mode to where, like, I didn't feel the pain. It was just, okay, how am I going to survive this? So I had to, like, somehow maneuver myself onto the boat, you know, obviously being cautious of my left leg with my bone sticking out, which that was a pretty endearing feat for me to get on that boat. But, you know, I made it happen. And, you know, everyone's freaking out. There's kids on the boat, right? And they're all screaming. And I'm just there. I'm like, I'm chugging water because I'm trying to keep myself conscious. Because if I pass out, I'm like, this is going to make it way harder for the people that are going to try to help me, the EMS team. And even think about the EMS team. I'm out on the coast. Who's going to come get me, right? My uncle had a phone number. He dialed it, right? And so while I was on the boat, I just kind of, like, you know, thought back to some, you know, good old basic training, first aid techniques that I learned in the military and some training that I learned in the ROTC. So I was like, yo, somebody find me some type of rope. So at first I had a paracord, like, rope, like a thick one, and a screwdriver. So I started making myself a tourniquet, and I'm like, no, this rope isn't going to cut it, because it was, like, cutting into my skin. And I was like, I need something, like, more soft, you know, because you know how tourniquets are made with, like, they're more, like, flat and they're, like, felt. So I took someone's long sleeve shirt, made myself a tourniquet using a screwdriver, and tightened that up. And then I was just, for the rest, like, it took probably 15 minutes for EMS to show up. And they came zipping in on 4x4s across the coast. And they wheeled me in on a backboard. They took me out the boat, wheeled me in, put me in the back of a 4x4, zipped across the sand. And then they drove me probably like 2 miles to the ambulance. And they put me in the back of the ambulance. And they had me pumped up with fentanyl, oxycodone, and all that. And then they rushed me to the hospital. And then at the hospital, they had me do x-rays and whatnot. And probably within 3 hours, I was in surgery. Probably one of the most miraculous things that's ever happened to me in my entire life, especially in that situation, was, I was just cut by the edge of a boat propeller, right? And in Florida, this happens more often than you would imagine because, people are riding their boats and it happens. And what typically happens is one of two things. Either because the laceration is so unpredictable and it's because the bacteria levels on like the propeller are so bad, the surgery requires plates and screws and whatnot to like put the bone back together, or the leg has to be amputated. So while I was being prepped for surgery, they told me, they're like, okay, we're going to have to put plates here, blah, 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 whatever. They put me on anesthesia. I woke up to find out that there were no plates. I didn't get my leg amputated. I still have my leg. What ended up happening was the cut was so clean. So like if you could imagine kind of like somebody chopping wood, right? And it kind of split like this. Mm-hmm. They were able to push the bone back into place and it fit so perfectly that they just set it there. So I was going to like heal at 100% within, the next 6 months. And that was an absolute blessing from God, right? And I was like, the whole situation was just insane to me. Like it was hard to kind of digest. But, I was already in that mentality of like putting God before everything. And like I saw God in that moment. I saw God in the moment when it came to the military, and I saw God in that moment. It was like if it took that much to knock me off my horse and to put me back on my path, like I must have been seriously messing up. Because and if I decided to like wave that goodbye and just continue on, like what happened to the drug test a year ago when I failed and I told myself I would change, but I didn't. If I did the same thing here, then like I would be missing out on an opportunity that God gave me to change myself. And I'm like, that's not going to happen. So yeah, during that week where I didn't have my left leg, I had to like make things happen as far as, moving off campus. And when I flew back home, I had to stay an extra week because they wouldn't let me fly after surgery. I had a few days to move out of my off-campus house and onto campus with a few dudes I didn't know. So I knew that was going to be pretty difficult just starting off the semester. During that time though, so I was dating a girl at the time, and I'm still dating her. But during that situation, amidst all of that, right, just kind of apart from all of it, I kind of had a slight falling out with the family because they just kind of found out more about my past, more about who I was in high school and like what I did in freshman year. And it's it makes sense, because like they were just trying to look out for their daughter, right? And I just came across as not a very safe dude to be around. That's just kind of how I came across because I didn't have the best reputation. The crazy thing about that though is that happened 3 weeks after I made that change in my head, right? But 3 weeks is nothing. Like you can't be like, oh, but I've changed. That's 3 weeks ago. Like you can't. So when I was sitting down and talking to them, I had to be like, yeah, like everything you're saying is 100% correct. It's like I can't act like I'm someone that I'm not. When at the end of the day, it was so frustrating to me because like I had just started, actually becoming the person I wanted to be. So starting the semester, I had one leg. I was in a house. I was in a place last minute that I left my really good friends that I had been with my entire time in college. I thought that I wasn't going to be with this girl that I, put so much of my time and effort into. And going into the semester, and I didn't know whether or not I was going to get kicked out of the ROTC and whether or not I was going to be able to stay in college. So I was like, but I wasn't going to let that take me down though, because I knew God had me. I was like, God has a plan. So like probably one of the things that made everything work out at the end was due to the accident that I got into with the boat, the insurance payout that came out of that pretty much kept me where I am now, and kind of, it allowed me to pay back the debt that I had to the ROTC and to pay for the rest of my school. And so that made me think, I was like, if I didn't get hit by this boat, I know. No, but like actually, like if I didn't get hit by this boat, where would I be right now? So just through those, fun series of events, I was just riding a roller coaster the whole time, and here I am. And I that was probably one of my most simple semesters I've ever lived, but it was also one of the best and most transformative semesters this past semester, because I just learned I got connected with so many good groups of guys, different Catholic schools around the area. And every single night I was at a men's group, and even 6 a.m. on Thursday mornings, I got connected with this men's group at Colorado School of Mines with a bunch of solid dudes. And, even though I wasn't, out partying and always like climbing mountains like I used to, like I still obviously do as much of the nature stuff that I can. But even though, and I thought that was just going to be the most miserable thing ever, but at the end of the day, it ended up being one of the most phenomenal periods of my life. And I'm just kind of excited to see what God has to do for me moving out of this last semester and going into grad school, God willing.
Yeah.
So,
Wow.
That's beautiful. Like, God throws you on roller coasters, but staying on that ride.
yeah. And like, even though it's so, like recent for me, it's such a recent occurrence and it's such a recent thing, a recent lifestyle change that I've made. Like, my desire to help others in my similar situation has just been so strong. And, being on the other side, I can see so many people in the same position as I am. Even I can see things happening in their life where God is coming down and trying to tell them something and then blatantly ignoring it. And like the thing I want to do most is like, yo, like, this is God telling you, like, this is God giving you a chance, like the best route that you have is to go down that path and to just listen to what he has to say, because then you're just going to end up finding yourself in trouble. Because I lived most of my life dodging bullets, right? Like, most of my life was spent dodging bullets. I mean, mainly having to do with like my mother in homeschooling, when I tried to just do everything she told me not to do. And I was like, oh, like, I'm going to get away with this. I'm going to get away with that. I'm going to have like 2 smartphones. I'm going to have 5 Snapchat accounts and blah, blah, blah. It's like, and I've just lived life dodging bullets, but like, you got to get hit. Like, you got to allow that bullet to sink deep, and you got to allow that bullet to actually bring you to the point of misery and pain and suffering. Because like, the Bible says how many times, it talks about suffering how many times. Suffering brings out character. Suffering brings out the person that you're supposed to be. Like, you can't find a solid, strong foundation in Christ unless you suffer. So many people dodge bullets or get clipped by bullets and they just brush it off and keep going. What I had to do when I was sitting between classes, when I didn't have my other leg and I was just chilling there, I couldn't do anything. I had to sit in my room. I had to allow myself to suffer. I'm like, I'm not with the friends that I'm used to being with. I'm not in a room with people that I'm familiar with. I don't know what's going to become of my future. I'm no longer seeing this girl that I've spent so much time with. Like, what am I supposed to do? And I just sat there, and like, sometimes I just sat there and cried. I'm gonna be real with you. Like, it got pretty real. But through that suffering is where I found the most closeness with God. Like, I felt so close to him in those moments. And you can only go up from there, right? Like, everyone deals with things differently. You can spend longer times in your suffering phase, but it only went it only went up from there. And I'm just so thankful for everything that happened. Like, I'm so thankful I got hit by that boat. I'm so thankful that I got kicked out of the ROTC. Like, I'm so thankful that, my girlfriend's parents came in and like gave me a reality shock. Like, I'm so thankful for all of that, because at the end of the day, what it did was it helped strengthen my faith, and it strengthened who I was. And that's what matters most. Like, everything that you have is going to mean nothing someday. Like, your character and who you are is what's going to matter most at the end of the day. And it's like, if something can strengthen that, then that's what matters. Like, that, like, you have to put that at the forefront of your life. So yeah, it was definitely a huge learning moment for me, but
that's beautiful. Like,
definitely super thankful.
Yeah, that's like fantastic. I remember hearing like some parts of the story, but like hearing the whole story and seeing what you're doing and how it transitions into your music.
Yeah.
Because the one song you put out maybe a handful of weeks ago.
Yeah, Take Me Away. Take Me Away, yeah. And yeah, that song, Take Me Away. And before so essentially Take Me Away was about that 1 month period of where everything happened, and where, I was just telling God to take me away, because that was like take me away from this life. It's miserable. Like just make me your vessel and show me where I should go, because that's all I want is direction. And that was kind of what that song spoke to. And that really helped solidify, my new passion and desire for music. Because, I've been interested in music for a while. It's probably a 5-year thing now where, I started off producing EDM on my old Dell laptop. And then I went from EDM, and I was on SoundCloud, and from EDM I started doing instrumentals, like hip hop instrumentals. And my like one thing I try to do is get random rappers on SoundCloud to hop on my beats, because I was like, yo, some dude is like rapping on my beat. This is the coolest thing ever. And I'll do it for free too. I would like almost beg them to rap over my beat, because I like just to hear another dude rapping over. I was like, this is sick. Like, this dude is from like New Jersey. He's rapping over my beat. And some dude did Spanish over my beat one time. I was like, this is insane. Yeah. And then how most things go with producers. They try to like start rapping themselves, and you always suck at the beginning. Like, it's gonna happen. Like, you always suck because you have like no equipment. Like, what are you doing? But I just found that writing lyrics was like one of the things that kind of helped ground me through high school. Because I didn't have that group of friends where I could really go to and just talk to, like, and get deep with. And I kind of got deep with myself in the music. Like, that's how I kind of coped. And that was my own. I don't want to like quote NF on this, but he released an album called Therapy Session, and in his music, like, he tells us like he does this for his own therapy, right? And like that's kind of how it was for me when I was rapping. It wasn't for like the audience. It wasn't for people who listened. Like, I got shit on so much for my music, and I just didn't care. I was like, so many people hated my music, and like sometimes people let that get to them. But for me, it was like, this isn't about you. I don't care if you like my music. This is about me. It's like, yeah, I'm putting it out on SoundCloud just to make myself feel good about it, just so I can like go there and listen to it. And like I had like a group of random people who would hype me up, and they kind of helped me get through, whatever. But that music, I just got super deep. It was all super depressing. Like, if you listen to any of my old music, super dark and depressing. Like, my mom one time listened to my old music, and this was a few years ago, and she put me into counseling. This is the true story. No, this is the true story. She put me into counseling because she heard my music. That's awesome.
That's awesome.
So yeah, I did counseling for a little bit, and he's like, "Why are you here?" I'm like,
"Well, my mom listened to my music."
Yeah. But I in high school, depression was one of those things where I hid. Like, I didn't let anyone know I was depressed. Like, obviously, if you heard my music, you would know, but not many people heard that. So it's like, nobody knew I was depressed in high school. Like, nobody. Like, but the way I came across to people was like the super positive, outgoing dude who who had energy all the time and wanted to be a part of everything. And, that was just, a face and a mask that I put on. But recently with music, just because of that, mainly because of all that I went through, but also even through this summer when I was experiencing like loneliness and like who I want to be, my new passion and drive for music shifted, and it was more of a, there's other people out there who are going through the same things that I am, and there's a way that I can put my music out there that can connect with people, that I can make it relatable, I can make it enjoyable to listen to, and I can make it have a positive message, because at the end of the day, a positive message is what the majority of people are drawn to. Some people are drawn to negative messages, but that's just because they're going through something, and it just kind of helps them feel grounded in their depression, but doesn't help them out in any way. I want to get real to the point where people can connect on a level to where they're like going through something, but it can actually give them kind of like a way out almost. But also the audience that I'm really focused on honing in on is kind of like that middle ground between secular and Christianity. So for instance, just kind of as like a and you can put a screenshot of this over on the podcast. I can kind of give you a screenshot of like my artist account and like how I see my analytics and stuff. But my song "Take Me Away," right? So like that genre is pop rap, but it's an entirely Christian message, but it has kind of a secular sound to it almost. And some of the the Spotify curators, if you look on my my playlist and where it's been placed, like it was placed on Top Christian Songs 2023, which is probably one of my best accomplishments. One of my the accomplishments I'm most fond of, just because I'm like, dang, like I'm on a Christian playlist, like this is awesome. But also it's on like rap, hip hop, workout, like all these rap playlists with like Lil Baby, like Young Gravy, like all these secular artists that people are super into. So like what I want to do is I want to find myself on both playlists. Like I want to talk to people who are like already kind of in their faith to the where they can relate to it, and I want to talk to people who are struggling and just let them know like this whole faith thing, like this whole putting your trust in God thing actually helps. So like that, like from now on and for the next few years, like that's what I'm going to focus on with my music, is to hone in on that audience.
Yeah.
But like that's not going to take away from me being as relatable and as real as possible and being as creative as I want with my music. And like, you know, my recent tracks have been pop rap, but you know, I've been in the studio a lot recently, and I've started writing more kind of acoustic tracks with guitar and piano, so that I'm thinking ahead to where like, okay, if I was to perform live, how would I do this? So I'm finding songs to where I can actually like play the guitar and piano live, where I can start singing. And like, I haven't always had like the greatest voice, but I found like if you just spend hours in your car, like listening to your favorite artist and just hitting every note that they hit, your voice just kind of like goes from here to here. Like if you just do that constantly, your voice gets better. So I've just been testing that, going to the studio and just kind of testing the boundaries of my voice. And I've been able to kind of sing songs closer to like Post Malone and Noah Kahan, and songs that I was like, I would dream of like playing live and like actually being able to sing that. But the more you practice, the better you get, you know? So I'm not really subject to a certain genre. I'm more subject to an audience right now. But like you'll see next year, I have so many unreleased tracks right now that I could fill next year with one song a month starting now. Like I can pre-release all my songs that have a song out every month, which I'm probably gonna have to release an album or do 2 a month at some point, just because I've been just putting so much time in the studio. But you know, it's cool to kind of, as I learn more and as I track my progress and as I progress, it's cool to see like, okay, like where am I gonna be? Like what's my goal here as an artist? And you know, this is more of like a recent thought in the artist track and as far as like honing in on my audience, but I really feel that up and coming Christian artists don't have too many resources to like go to and networking opportunities. Obviously social media is phenomenal. Like I try to use social media to my advantage as much as I can as far as like networking with individuals. Like I'm always DMing people like about their music, and people are always hitting me up like, hey, can I feature on your track and stuff, which is beautiful, right? Like that's probably the best form of networking, is to find your music on other people's accounts and just kind of get introduced to their audience, right? But I really want to kind of take my artist path and just kind of expand that to more of like a community almost. Like I want to build a Christian promotional media company that focuses on curating playlists catered to up-and-coming Christian artists on Spotify and social media and Apple Music, to where like we can find each other. To have like playlists of up-and-coming Christian artists to where they can listen to each other's music, connect, network, learn from each other, and grow together. And there's so many companies out there like that. Like as an artist myself, I get 20 plus DMs a day from scam networking companies, like music promotional companies. And I know you guys are going to get that too with your podcast. People are like, yo, I cannot. He's like, $20 right now, I give you 100,000 views. Like that's how it sounds. Like, I have a whole packet right here. We have 5 options, right? $10, you get 1 million views on TikTok. $100, I'll give you 1 million monthly listeners on Spotify. So it's like probably 99% of those messages are scams, because like you can't build an audience in one night. You can't. It has to be over time. So what I want to do with my company is I want to cater towards those up-and-coming Christian individuals and build a community to where we can grow with each other over time, and to where we can create a bigger audience for ourselves, and to where we can actually find solid fans and a solid audience across all platforms that are just interested in that type of music. And, you know, as an independent artist myself and as somebody who plans to stay independent, you know, that's a completely different conversation than when you're talking about somebody who's going to sign themselves to a label. Right. Because they have management, they have people pulling the strings. And I feel like as a Christian independent artist, you know, I guess it's typical for you to just be like, okay, I'm going to be independent the whole time. I know there are management companies out there, and if it's for you, it's for you. But staying independent is all about the effort and the time and what you put into it. Because as like we were talking about when we were doing the B-roll before this podcast, was the algorithm only picks up what you put out.
Yeah.
So like as a community of people building each other up, like you have to give each other motivation to keep going, or else you're not going to go anywhere. Because like at the end of the day, people will love your music. Like I'm going back to this, like people will love your music. And as an artist, this is one of the main things that keeps me going and what drives me is that I have an audience and they're out there. They're just waiting for my music to hit their feed. They're waiting for my music to hit their Spotify recommended playlist. Like they're waiting for that to happen. But because I'm lazy, they're not going to hear that. And my music isn't going to touch people's lives. My music isn't going to save people unless I keep putting out my stuff. And it's like, it's hard to motivate yourself as an individual. It's hard to do that. So with that company and with that idea, and like I said, this is a very new concept of mine, but I'm going to roll with it and I'm going to see what happens. Like I want a community of people that's going to push each other to keep going and to keep putting stuff out there, because there are people out there that want to listen to your music. Like if two people come to you with your song and they're like, yo, I love this song, like I'm bumping this, are those two people 2 in 7 billion? No, that's statistically impossible. Those two people are just random people who have the desire to listen to your music because they like it. Mm-hmm. So let's say that those two people are similar to 10% of the population. What's 10% of 7 billion? I can't do math. It's like 700 something.
Brian, percent of 7 billion is 7 million.
7 million?
No, 70 million.
70 million. Like that's a lot. Like 70 million monthly listeners on Spotify is probably a top 50 artist on the planet.
Yeah.
That's true.
So like Taylor Swift has 102 monthly listeners on Spotify. She has probably one of the most successful, well-known management teams out there. So what they do is they make her music heard across like globally. That's what they do because they have the resources to do that. Like obviously as a small nobody upcoming independent artist as myself, like I have to do what I can, and I'm never going to probably reach that level because I don't have the resources. But at the end of the day, there's an audience out there waiting for you. And that's why I'm making my music. I'm making my music for them, for the people that are going to hear my music and the people that are going to connect to it. Because I'm always going to make my music relatable. And I'm always going to try to connect to some positive aspect to help somebody out, who's going through something and who needs to hear it.
Yeah, 'cause I love that song. It's a hit. Like you talk about, like, finding that person that it hits. It hits me.
Yeah.
And it's actually funny. So, Halvey, he was with he does.
Yeah. No, I listen to a lot of his stuff and I am connected with him. I don't talk to him obviously, but like I follow his stuff on Instagram. He inspires me for sure.
Dude, I went to a concert. Concert. He was like Halvey, just 2 other guys that I've never heard of.
Yeah.
And going to a Christian rap concert, I was like, okay, it's a Christian rap concert.
Yeah.
It was amazing.
Really.
Music was fantastic. And then the community you were with. I didn't realize there was that big of a community for Christian rap.
Yeah.
And you felt safe. I didn't feel like I was going to get bugged. We were like not moshing, but we're like jumping up and down, like just going ham. Like Love Like That hit so hard. It was fantastic.
That's beautiful.
And I'm so excited to see making that community for that to help young artists go and push. Like I want to push more Christian artists on my Instagrams to give them a lift because they're there.
Yeah.
But like you said, it's not being pushed out. I mean, that's what the world and put a little tinfoil hat on. Like they don't want positive messages out there.
No.
They want they can control what they want to push out.
Exactly.
And doing God's will and listening to God is what's needed in society.
You have to, for one, you have to have a very strong passion and desire to do it because you're entering a battlefield, right? Like you have to be willing to back yourself up. You have to be willing to back up what you're talking about. You have to be willing to be vulnerable with people. Like, guys, like I'm in the same spot as you. Like, it's not, the Bible isn't, I mean, in a way the Bible does pretty much solve all your issues, but it's not that simple. It's not that simple. And as a Christian artist, you have to let people know that it's not just about going to church and reading your Bible. It's about living the lifestyle of a Christian. Because I know there are Christian artists out there who don't live the lifestyle, and they don't back up their music. They're almost kind of frauds in a way for not backing up their music. And you have to have that mentality because if people are gonna follow you and people are gonna soak in your content, like you have to put out what you're putting out. Like you have to come across as the person that you're. I mean, you just don't lie. Like don't lie to people. Like just be vulnerable and be upfront with people because that's what people are looking for. Like people are looking for somebody they can connect to on like a personal level. And I'm not saying that's how music works at the end of the day, because we can all point fingers at different artists who came up, who kind of exploded overnight to where like nobody cares about what they're doing with their life. Nobody cares about who they are as a person. Their music makes me feel good, because like music has that capability. Music has the capability to invoke an emotion in you that you didn't know was there, and then you can become addicted to it, and you just want to listen to it more and more. But you know, if you're focusing on that, then you're pretty much just throwing darts at a dartboard and trying to hit the bullseye every time. Like that's pretty much how if you're trying to like just, oh, I hope this song is just gonna land and it's gonna like invoke this emotion in somebody, and if it does, they're gonna listen to it, because at the end of the day, like that song might evoke that emotion, but what about your other songs? Are they gonna be interested in what you have coming next? Are they gonna be interested in your growth and what you have to say, like over like social media? And if you were to perform live, would they want to put their money and time and effort into getting there and actually seeing you and actually perform? You know, that's a whole different story. So, you know, growing up, my music taste has changed a lot, and I was very much of that person who I could care less about what they were saying in the song. It was just more about how it made me feel. And, you know, I respect, you know, to people who are like that. Like, that's completely fine. Like, listen to music that makes you, like, if on my workout playlist, like, I probably wouldn't show some people what's on that playlist, because, like, that playlist just makes me, like, get in the zone, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
But it's definitely important, because, like, the devil works in music to an extreme extent. Like, the devil works through music in a way that's more powerful than most people realize. Like, more powerful than most people realize. Like, you know, if you're familiar with some of like the heavy metal and the death metal scenes, and kind of like how they present themselves as like anarchists or Satanist devil worshippers and whatnot, like that's super real. Like, because like they get so enveloped in that lifestyle, and that's what drives them. And because the devil, like Satan is a powerful force who has control over people's lives just as much as God does. Like, God obviously is more powerful in every way, but Satan has that same hold on people. So he can push you and he can drive you to putting out content that he wants people to hear, and he can use you as a vessel to steer people away. And he does that in subtle ways too. Like, obviously that death metal example I gave you, like that's pretty much out there and like up front. Like, and if you listen to that, then it's pretty obvious. But like, there are artists out there, mainstream artists. I'm not going to name anyone. I'm not going to name drop, but like there are people that get hundreds of millions of views and listens every month. And if you really listen to their message, it kind of like plants a seed almost. Yeah. It plants a seed.
100%.
Yeah. So it's like you have to be cautious about what you listen to and what you put in your body, and you have to be listening to it with like an open heart almost, and with the willingness to like understand, like, okay, I'm not going to allow this to like plant. I'm not going to allow it to plant seeds, you know. And that's kind of something I learned moving forward, and like how my taste in music has changed. And it's still like, you know, somewhat secular, somewhat Christian, you know, but yeah, there's good stuff out there regardless if it's Christian or not. So, and I want to be somebody who plants seeds in people, but like positive seeds, to like be a testimony. And I know that sounded kind of wrong, but like, you know what I'm saying. But
be the good in the world that you want to see.
Yeah,
yes.
Thank you for
your music is food to a lot of people's imagination.
Thank you so much for clarifying. Yeah.
So where can people find your music? You mentioned like Spotify, Apple, but do you have like your Instagram? Whatever you have, we'll pop it up too.
Okay, yeah. So my artist name is Kolbe. It's just my first name, Kolbe. So yeah, that's on all platforms, like any platform you listen to. I'm focusing mainly on Spotify right now, just because that's what I personally use as an individual. Like, not to throw shade on you Apple Music users. I'm working on building my audience, and even you Amazon and YouTube. Like, I'm really trying to build my audience across all platforms, because it's super important. But on Instagram, you can find me at Kolbe Music Page. That's KOLBE Music Page. And then YouTube is Kolbe. And then if you just go to my Instagram, there's a link in the bio that'll take you to anywhere that you want to go. But yeah, KOLBE.
Yeah, I'll throw it up everywhere. I'll throw it up on screen, put it in the description, do as best I can. But Kolbe, this was fantastic. Like, I'm excited to see where you're able to go. I'm excited for new music. Like, genuinely listen to your music, and it's sick.
No, I'm super excited to see where it takes me, for sure.
This is awesome. This has been podcast 22.
Thank you guys so much for having me.
Thank you, man.
Yeah, dude. We're out.
That's sick.